r/Nosleep. Posted by u/Robin Anonymous. Ever since moving into my stepfather's new house, he's always made it clear of one rule: never go inside the basement. The students he's keeping captive have glowing eyes. Part 2. Ignore my brother. He's not himself. The voice snapped me out of it, a gruff murmur. But I didn't hear it. Not like I hear things normally. I could feel it grazing the back of my thoughts, a static crackling erupting into life inside my skull. It sounded like a radio being tuned in for the first time. At first, I thought I was imagining it, but looking past the raven-haired boy, tearing my gaze from the motionless body of myself, lying in congealing crimson, I glimpsed a second kid who looked around the same age as the raven. He was resting on his back, dressed in the same clinical white clothes. The second boy stood out in the white, sporting unbrushed reddish curls. He seemed to notice me staring and sat up, offering me a small smile, freckles speckled across pale cheeks. Though the smile didn't quite reach his eyes. Unlike the raven, the redhead's expression was deadly serious. I could only stare at the empty spot where my own body had been. It had been there 1 second and gone the next. I didn't know what to question first. How? He cut me off with an eye roll. Save it. I hid her for a while. I don't think seeing her is going to help. The boy was muttering into my head. His tone was dismissive, like telepathy was a normal thing for him. I waited for him to speak with his mouth, but he didn't, only offering me a shrug. His voice was tripping on static, and I had to stop myself from slamming my hands over my ears. But there was no way to block him. He was inside my head. As I said, ignore my bro. He's under the program's control. Trust me, he's not normally like this. I couldn't stop staring at the spot where my replica had lain. Red shook his head. Don't worry about that right now. You need to shut the program down. I'd make you do it myself, but the pizza guy drained me of energy. The memory of twitching eyes and stumbling speech hit me like a lightning bolt. That was you? The redhead nodded mutely, holding my gaze. Yep. It was easy. Well, not really. He was stronger than I thought. The good news is you got rid of your suppressor and now I can get into your head. What are you talking about? Another hysterical giggle from the raven. You're scaring her. Red rolled his eyes at the other boy. Shut up for a second. He turned back to me. You need to shut the program down. Do you see that machine over there? The one on the wall? I took a step back. It was too much. Too fast. Too much. I couldn't register all the information battering me. I have a better question, I said slowly, tripping over my words. Why is my stepfather doing this? I had to choke back a sob racking my chest. That girl. Who was she? The boys exchanged a glance and the raven's lips curled into a smirk. You don't want to know, he sang before throwing himself into the glass. I stumbled back, noticing bruises blooming down his arms, blue and yellow flourishes tainting his skin like a canvas. The raven must have seen me glimpse the marks covering him. He threw his head back and laughed. He was enjoying it. I felt physically sick. The boy was thrilled by my disgust. Mr. Clayton is a bad man. Do you want to know how bad? No. I took another shaky step back. No, I refused to believe my stepfather had done this. Hey, concentrate. Red was quick to snap, his voice like electroshocks inside my head. He marched over to the glass, folding his arms across his chest and gesturing across the room. The machine over there. If you can't do it, I'll make you do it. Anything to get us out of here. I had a sickly feeling he wasn't joking. Red looked far too young to have such haunted eyes like his brother. He looked like he used to smile, laughing lines still creasing his forehead. Though I had an inkling, judging from the sharp look in his eyes and curl in his lips, he hadn't laughed in a while. If I do this, I spoke softly. Carefully. I had no idea who I was dealing with. You'll tell me what my stepfather is doing to you. Of course. Red inclined his head. Do you want to know? I could only nod. Good. Help us, and we'll tell you everything. I hesitated. Your names, I spoke softly, what are your names? The boy shrugged. No idea, none of us do. Mr. C took them away a long time ago. Took them? Red's words were like needles sticking into my brain. Later. The boy grumbled, his voice prickling. Give my brother and sister their minds back, and then we can talk. My blood ran cold. Sister? The raven head appeared again, flashing me a manic grin, eyes glittering. I froze in place, unable to tear my gaze from him. Did you think it was just us two? He pressed his face against the glass and blew a raspberry. Mr. C doesn't pick smart ones, does he? The Raven's words sent my stomach slithering into my toes. I wanted to run. God, I just wanted to race back upstairs and never look back. I'd grab my mother's hand and we would run far away. But the curious part of me was desperate to know why. I wanted to know why my stepfather had kids inside his basement. Why he'd taken their names from them, trapping them behind a wall of glass. Why one of them could talk into my head, which wasn't a hallucination. I shook my head and forced myself to concentrate. The machine was like a computer monitor. I frowned at the keyboard, hovering my fingers over the keys. What do I do? Okay. Go slowly. The redhead's voice was calm. It's a touch screen. All you need to do is find where the program is running from and shut it down, alright? It's easy. Following Red's instructions, my gaze flicked to the screen. Mr. Clayton had left his Gmail inbox displayed, and seeing it right there in front of me, I couldn't resist hesitantly tapping on the first email at the top, which was simply labeled, regarding Friday. Friday, I thought dizzily. Today was Friday. From, T.E. 2, BC, I trust the prototypes will be ready for screening on Friday? You spoke of them not being finished, but I think you know I want to see something worthwhile, Clayton. Or the deal is off. I will of course be bringing associates. Make sure refreshments and your finest wine is available. It almost felt like I was drowning again, back when I lost Claire. The same sensation of weights on my chest, phantom fingers tugging on my ankles, pulling me down, down, down. Prototypes, I thought dizzily. What were the prototypes? The program, Red muttered impatiently into my head. Ignore everything else, okay? Shut down the program. I couldn't. My hands wouldn't move. Everything else was like white noise, and my finger hovered over the next email, which was labeled, Test 1. Don't. The redhead said sharply. Trust me, you don't want to look at them. He let out a soft breath. If you still want to see your stepfather in a good light, leave them. I promise we'll tell you everything we know. Everything. The raven head joined in with a lucid laugh. We'll tell you everything he did to us. Again. Needles. They were sticking into me, each of his words perforating. The email was still lodged in the back of my head. Who was T.E.? What did he want from Mr. Clayton? Ignore him. Red's voice splintered my thoughts once again. Just focus on the program, Molly. It didn't surprise me that he knew my name. Nodding, I swallowed hard and minimized the emails which left me on the desktop. There were 3 tabs at the bottom of the screen. Gmail, my files, and something called Project Indiana. That's it. Shut it down, Molly. I tapped the bottom tab and a black window popped up with the word running in white text. That's it, Red coaxed me. Scroll down to the bottom. There should be 2 buttons that say End and Run. Click End. Following the boy's words, I scrolled to the bottom and stabbed the End button. The box disappeared, and I lost my breath. At first, nothing happened. I moved slowly back to the glass wall. Red nodded at me. Thank you. I wouldn't have actually tried to possess you, you know. I'm not a total ass. Ignore him, I thought, pushing the boy's impossible words down. Possession was not real. Except I'd seen it, a buzz of electric blue light sparking inside the pizza guy's eyes. I don't understand, I whispered, what did I do? The redhead's lips curled into what might have been an actual smile. Wait for it. I opened my mouth to speak when the raven head seemed to come to life suddenly with a sharp inhale like he'd just woken up. Blinking rapidly, he got to his feet, looking disoriented and pulling at his clothes. What? His voice was a soft croak. The raven turned to Red with wide eyes. How long? 3 days. Red's voice seeped into my mind easily. Mr. Clayton wasn't happy with you. The asshole's never happy with me, Raven grumbled. Then his gaze found mine. He scoffed, and I could see the same electric blue light sizzling in his eyes. Took you long enough. I struggled to reply. What? Cut it out. Red murmured, as if in warning. His eyes flashed too. I wondered if that's what connected them, that light dancing around their iris. She's going to get us out of here. That agitated the raven. Sure, he muttered, turning to his brother. And what the fuck are you doing just standing there? There's a body right in front of you, moron. Use it. Body, I thought. That's all I was to them. I was a skin suit ready for them to take over. Who are you? This time there was a female voice. The boys veered around, a sudden look of alarm crossing both of their faces. Dressed in the same bland shorts and t-shirt, the girl may have caught a lot of attention at one point. She reminded me of a cheerleader, the type of girl on the top of the high school social ladder. She was still pretty. One of the most beautiful girls I had ever seen. Whatever had been done to her, however, had taken the spark from her eyes, the color from cheeks that were gaunt, the ghost of a sharp jawline lingering. Her skin was a warm olive shade, except it looked washed out. Too pale. The girl's hair flowed down her back like black ink of a tilted piece of parchment, straying strands dancing in eyes which were fox-like, almost feral, peering at me with childlike bafflement. Before I could coerce words, the girl was taking long strides towards the glass. She pressed her palms against the pane. "You're pretty," the girl murmured, her lips curling into a playful smile. "Are you going to get us out of here, pretty girl?" To my surprise, neither of the boys spoke. They only watched her with wide eyes. "I can't," I whispered, locking eyes with her. I don't know how." "Oh. Is that right?" The girl's smile crept away. Her eyes darkened, that same pulsing light that had become all too familiar between the three of them, sparking to life. I couldn't move. All of my instincts screamed at me to get away from the glass, but I stayed, stuck, all the breath drained from my lungs. The girl's expression reminded me of a toddler. She scowled before slamming her fists into the glass. This time it wasn't just her eyes that ignited. Her hands sizzled cerulean, fingertips illuminating, and with another violent hit, the whole pane lit up. This time I screamed. I couldn't help it. "I liked you, pretty girl," the girl sighed, lips parting like she was going to sing. She wasn't singing though. She was screaming. "No." Both boys seemed to snap out of it, the two of them grabbing the girl and dragging her back, the scream cutting off. The redhead wrapped his arms around the struggling girl, pressing his face into her shoulder, while the raven closed his arms around the two of them, stopping the squeaking girl from breaking away. "You'll kill her," Red was gasping, his sharp breaths pulverizing my skull. "Do you hear me?" He grabbed the girl's face, cradling it, his own eyes shimmering that same sizzling electric light. "Do you want to hurt her?" The girl glared back. "If it gets us out of here," she gritted out, shoving him away. "I don't care." But she didn't make a move towards the glass. "You're an idiot," the raven had mumbled, holding her tighter. Though now it seemed he was just hugging her, all you'll manage to do is blow her brains out, and what then? "I don't care," the nameless girl shrieked. Out. I had to get out. Whatever the girl was capable of, I didn't want to see it. I was taking slow steps backwards, my gaze stuck to the three of them, my breath in my throat when I hit something. Something fleshy. Twisting around, my heart dived into my throat. Standing there was my stepfather. Next to him was my mother. "Molly." Mr. Clayton's eyes were hard. "What did I tell you about the basement?" His tone was patronizing. I was speechless for a moment before I found my mother standing behind him. I expected her to cry out at the sight in front of her, the three kids trapped behind the wall of glass. Except Mom wasn't looking at them. She was looking at me, her lips curled into a scowl. "Sweetie," my mother shook her head. "What did I tell you about respecting your father's privacy?" "What?" I couldn't resist a laugh. Instead of answering Mom, I made my way over to the glass. The three teens had gone silent, still clinging onto each other. "Dad?" I spat the word like splintered ice. "When exactly were you planning on telling me you were keeping 3 college kids down here?" Mr. Clayton cleaned his throat. "Molly, now let's not get hasty." "No," I spoke slowly. "No, Dad, I want to know why they're here." The man curled his lip. And that's when he broke through his facade, the real monster coming out. "Do you really think I'm going to explain myself to a child?" His voice was harsh, nothing like the warm murmur I was used to. I steeled myself. "Well, why are they here? What do you expect me to think?" Ignoring my question, he strode to the monitor where I had knocked off the program. "Amelia, it seems your daughter likes to touch things that aren't hers." He tapped the screen and the boys slipped to the ground as if their puppet strings had been severed. They dropped to their knees in sync, dragging the girl with them. "What did you do to them?" I demanded, pressing my face against the glass. Mr. Clayton hummed and stepped away from the monitor. "I suppose now is the time to tell you girls about my other children." Nodding at the three teens, he broke out into a smile. "Meet Indigo, Violet, and Purple. They're kids from my first marriage, and after coming to terms with the fact that they are incredibly dangerous, I had no other choice but to keep them down here. Both for my wife's safety, as well as my stepdaughter. Mom's smile was robotic. Of course, sweetie. You did the right thing. You're joking, right? I turned to Mom. You can't seriously believe this. Mr. Clayton shook his head and nodded to the raven-haired boy, whose eyes were vacuous, thoughtless once again. His expression was terrifying. Everything that had been him, the look of terror and pain, had been wiped away. Violet, what is the reason why you're down here? The boy's head snapped up automatically. I'm a menace to society, father. A smirk prickled across my stepfather's lips and I fought to swallow bile. He was enjoying this. Whatever control his stepfather had over them, he was thriving in it. Wonderful. His gaze flicked to the girl. And Indigo? Am I a bad father, Or do you deserve to be down here? The girl seemed to come to life, puppeteered by Mr. Clayton's words. I hurt people, she whispered. I deserve to be down here where I'm not a danger to myself and others. Quite right, Clayton said, his gaze flicking back to me. Are you satisfied? I wasn't. Why not ask the redhead? I demanded, knowing he couldn't. Because the redhead could only speak into my mind. He had no fucking voice, and my stepfather had done that to him. My stepfather blew out an irritated breath. Like I said before, I will not be spoken down to by a little girl. He seemed to study me. Molly, now I've told you what you want to know. I'd very much like to know where your necklace is. That gemstone was a lot of money and was, of course, my gift to you when I wed your mother. His eyes searched hers. He was calm, but I detected desperation. You haven't told me anything, I retorted. Tell me what you're doing to those kids. I turned back to my mom. You can't possibly be okay with this. She simply smiled. Your father is right, she said, if they're dangerous, they belong down here. My blood was boiling. Can't you see he's lying? He's using them as lab rats. There's something seriously wrong with them if you would just listen to me. Mr. Clayton's eyes dimmed. His smile disappeared. Molly, he growled, cutting me off. I won't ask you again. Where's your necklace? Losing my bravado, I avoided his eyes. I don't know. Except I did. It was on the floor behind me. The necklace was significant, I knew that. The raven head, even in his trance-like state, had insisted on me leaving it on the ground. I traced the curve of my throat, pretending to search for it. I think I took it off before I went in the shower earlier. It's still in the downstairs bathroom. Wonderful. Turning to my mom, he beamed. Sweetheart, please head upstairs and be ready to invite our guests in. I believe your daughter needs a little time out so she can calm herself down. Guests? I parroted, my heart speeding up. What guests? Amelia, I had no idea you had raised a mini Nancy Drew. Mr. Clayton laughed, but his eyes were hard, waiting for me to make eye contact. Molly, you're asking far too many questions and I'm afraid our time for talking is up. I have a meeting to attend to and I believe it's your bedtime. I folded my arms. You're not my father. Which was true. The realization was like a wave of ice-cold water enveloping me. For so long, I'd had it in my head that he was my father. He would protect me and Mom. Except he wasn't. He was a monster, and those warm thoughts soothing me, telling me he was the best thing to ever happen to me and Mom, they were not my thoughts. Which begged the question, how long had I been under his control, and what had put me into such a thoughtless, dreamy state? I'm calling the police. I was surprised how steady my voice was. I took careful steps back, keeping my gaze glued to the monster in front of me. I'm sure they'll be curious to know why an inventor has 3 college kids in his basement, I shrugged, flashing him a smile. You can even ask them for a DNA check, just to be sure they're yours, of course. I wasn't expecting Mr. Clayton's to break out into a terrifying grin. Sweetheart, you have no idea what you're playing around with. I do, I said softly, my voice was choked. You're hurting them. They told me you hurt them. He inclined his head. They are emotionally disturbed. Of course they are going to say that. I shrugged. Like I said, we can ask the police. I was turning away to run, to get as far away from my mother who was under his control and the mad scientist who was my father when something sharp pricked me in the back of the neck. The sickening sensation of Clayton's snake-like arms were wrapping around me, squeezing, almost suffocating. All at once, it was like cold water seeping into my veins and numbing my bones. I felt myself go slack. I was falling, head spinning, before hitting the floor. My tongue was entangled. There was so much I wanted to say. I wanted to know why he had a replica of me. And she was dead. Oh, dear. Mr. Clayton mocked a sigh. It looks like moving day took its toll on Molly. She can barely keep her eyes open. My mom hummed. She should go to bed. A good night's sleep will do her good. All I could do was stare at the two shadows looming over me. My mother and stepfather. Clayton folded his arms. When he was sure I was completely incapacitated, he once again slipped from his caring father role, straight back to the mad scientist. Her suppressor is missing, that explains why she found them in the first place. My mother's reply sounded like wind chimes. I'll make sure to find it. He nodded, satisfied. We'll be going ahead with stage 2 tonight. The buyer is getting impatient, and I need to get on with the presentation. The prototypes are ready to be screened, so nothing can go wrong. Mr. Clayton turned to my mother. Do you understand me, Amelia? Your little bitch of a daughter came far too close. I want her in complete isolation at least for the next few weeks. Of course, honey. Dark spots speckled my vision. I felt my mother's warm arms wrap around me, scooping me into the air. She smelled of lavender and blueberry tea. It felt like I was flying. My head fell against Mom's chest. Whatever he'd plunged into my system had turned my body to stone. I could only hang helplessly from Mom's embrace. Take Molly upstairs. Mr. Clayton ordered. Lock her in her room and get extra security. I want her to stay there until I've finished the first demonstration. If you remember what happened last time, right Amelia? I'm sure you wouldn't want to lose another child. I held on to those last words, trying to cling on, the pool of molasses, which was my brain, attempting to register them. And then I was falling. Mr. Clayton's last words dragging me completely under.